Hi, welcome to another episode of Be Positive on etbrandequity.com. I'm your host, Ambi Parmeshwaran, and today we have with us Sapna Arora, CMO India, APAC, LATAM of OLX Group. As viewers know, this episode, and of course all the previous episodes we've done till now and future episodes, we do talk to high achieving chief marketing officers of a wide variety of companies to understand their career journey, what they did, what education they went through, and how they have managed to overcome obstacles, objections, failures, rejection, bounce back, and become positive and successful in what they're doing today. So, let me first welcome our guest, Sapna Arora. Sapna, thank you very much for joining us in your busy schedule.
Thank you, Ambi. It's a privilege. As a student, as a young student, as a marketeer, as I was growing up, I've always looked up to you. So I have to pinch myself to believe that I'm in a conversation with you. So thank you. It's a privilege for me as well.
You're making me sound very, very, very old. Okay. Anyway, thank you for those kind words. In this show, we will talk about your fabulous journey across FMCG marketing to becoming a startup advisor and then joining a phenomenally successful uh, global company as which has operations in what 45 countries and which has 200 million customers every month. I mean that's an amazing number. I remember another show we were talking to the Amazon CMO, and he said that they get about 100 million uh, customers. Currently Amazon India has, so 200 million customers is a staggeringly large number. And in fact, you worked uh, in some highly respected multinational corporations in the FMCG sector. And I'm sure all of us, our viewers, and me included, will learn a lot by talking to you about your career. So, uh, the show is about the importance of being positive, overcoming objections, like I said. So before I start asking you about your career, we'd like to know something about your childhood, about where you're born, brought up. And I noticed that you did your undergrad in St. Stephen's College, which I'm told is to be referred to as the college, right? So was it all Delhi, or did you live across India?
Sure. So, Ambi, I'll just take you through, where all I have been. So there are broadly two paths, and it's either been Delhi or non-Delhi, and Delhi has had a comeback. So the first part of my life was in Delhi. I grew up in Delhi. I did my schooling, my undergrad, one of my postgrads in Delhi, and my second postgrad was in Bangalore, and that's when the moving out, the exodus from Delhi happened. So I went to IIM Bangalore. Thereafter, the placement happened via PNG at Mumbai. And with PNG itself, I moved to Singapore. Then I had a short stint at Reckitt in Gurgaon. And then I got married. I moved to Canada, lived there for quite a few years, worked at Nestle in Toronto. Very cold place, very, very unlike the tropical
Okay.
weather that we
Hey,
have in Delhi.
Sapna, you're going way ahead of all. We are not for. We need to stay with your college and your school and college. And I
Sure.
think you did your MBA from NIFT, right, Delhi, right? So let's go back to your schooling. Was it all in Delhi? Were you a naughty kid? Were you a studious kid? And getting into St. Stephen's is like a dream come true. So I want to know how you made it into St. Stephen's.
Sure. So let me tell you a little bit about my schooling as well. I have done my schooling in Delhi. Until class 10, I was in a girls' school. It was run by nuns, very strict, very fastidious about each and every little detail about how you carry yourself, how you deliver your work, what you talk. We had rules like we couldn't speak a word in Hindi in school, and those were the days when English was a highly glorified thing. Yeah, I did my schooling until 10th over there. Thereafter, I wanted to do non-medical, and that school, Holy Child, didn't offer non-medical. So I switched over to another school, Springdale's, which was a co-ed school. So that was a huge shock for me, because the only males that I had interacted with in my life were either cousins or brothers or family members, father, and so on. So that was a very, very rude shock. And high school kids can be quite bullying. So I had to face that. And it was also a non-medical section, so we had just a very few girls in my section, and did face a lot of bullying. I was in half a mind to go back to my girls' school, but anyways, I survived through that. Some bit of cajoling by my parents, some bit of the non-pragmatic part of going back, and stuff like that. Just pulled along. So I finished my schooling. I was a science student. I tried for engineering, didn't make it to engineering colleges, and St. Stephen's happened. I used to love physics. There was a high school teacher that I had in Holy Child who had just inculcated a very deep love for physics in me, Mrs. Shailesh. And taking on from that, I had a good percentage. And in those
So
days,
did you?
admission.
So you're saying talking about physics, and we've had one or two other guests on our show here who talked about their own passion for physics and how
Yes.
how they were. So were you also one of those science talent kids who went and got the Olympic, whatever, the science Olympiad and all that stuff, and read Feynman lectures? Were you into all that, or was it a little less intense physics?
I was very focused on what was a part of the curriculum. I wasn't delving too much. In fact, I've discovered my love for science more when I've been teaching science to my kids now. So yeah, I mean, at that time it was mostly a one track. Trying to get admission into a good college. That was a core motivation. So
So obviously, I mean, what you're saying is that you did have a school teacher who put that interest in physics into you, and it did you well, right? You got into St. Stephen's, which is, I remember a dear friend of mine telling me that she sent her daughter to the US to study in one of the better universities there because her daughter could not get into St. Stephen's, right? So
yeah.
a lot of people do believe that getting into St. Stephen's is equal to getting into any Ivy League college in the US. Would you subscribe to that?
I would say so. I think the way the curriculum is handled, the commitment of the faculty, it was all super. But unfortunately, I mean, then it comes to the receiver of the knowledge. A lot of students don't continue with pure academics, with pure sciences thereafter. And that is what happened with me as well. So whilst I was clear that I either wanted to do engineering or pure sciences for undergrad, thereafter I didn't have clarity. And as second year of college approached, we started talking amongst ourselves as to what is the next step. And that is when we discovered that there's something called an MBA. It was still not a very, very hot
come on,
education.
yaar. It was not hot. I mean, you're like half my age, and it was hot during my time. But St. Stephen's is really a machine which produces IAS and IFS officers. How come you didn't get
Yes.
bitten by the IAS bug?
So that is on the humanities side. So we had two parts to the building, and I was on the left side, which is all sciences, which is, I mean, when I say all sciences, it was physics and chemistry. We didn't have biology.
Were you a day scholar or were you a hostelite?
I was a day scholar. Being a Delhiite, I was a day scholar. Yeah. So, then, wanted.
So after St. Stephen's, how come NIFT happened? You didn't try for the IIMs and things like that, or?
I absolutely tried. So we had some of our seniors who told us that there's these package courses available, and you subscribe to them. And of course, there were few options at that time. So I took that route. I started taking the entrance exams for management courses. NIFT was one of the management courses which is offered. The course that I ultimately took was garment manufacturing technology. It's a manufacturing technology postgrad course which is focused on the garment industry. So actually, I didn't make it to the IIMs at that time in my first attempt, and that's how I landed up at NIFT. And the NIFT exam compared to the CAT exam turned out to be a breeze. And I had, I later figured out I had topped in that exam. So there was under duress. I just went there. And of course, there were very few options. The options for undergrads taking up employment were few far between. So if I look at the companies that come for placement now to Stephens to pick up undergrad colleges compared to the companies that came then, I mean, at that time, it was a mere exception. So
Today,
that's how I
just
landed
to
up
bring
at
it
NIFT.
alive, bring it alive. Today, I think even consultants go to St. Stephens. Right?
Yes,
Your
yes,
McKinseys and the BCGs of this world. I know recruit from St. Stephens and Ashoka University and Loyola and St. Xavier's. But
absolutely.
you're talking about what, 15 years ago, 16 years ago, right? Yeah. So
I'm talking of 94. That's when I graduated. So that's a good 17
yeah.
years ago.
How
Yeah.
was the experience in NIFT? It is India's number one fashion technology institute, right? So
Yeah. So NIFT again was it was a bit of a stupor for me because that is not where my heart was. I kind of feel a little bad about having wasted the seat. I was very intensely focused on clearing the CAT. In fact, I took the CAT exam again in my first year of NIFT, and I was very clear that if once I get the admission, I'm just here temporarily because I don't have another place to park myself. I didn't clear it in the second attempt, and then the third attempt, which is when NIFT had to culminate. There's an interesting story behind that. So that was the time I must have been around 22, 23 ish. I come from a very traditional Punjabi family, and my parents had started groom hunting by then. So I said, okay, if I have to take the third exam, if they come to know, it'll be an utter nuisance. There'll be a lot of bawling which will happen all throughout. So I took it without their knowledge. And those were the days when you had to get the admit card, you had to send a draft, the institute would send you a roll number. So I used the postal address of a friend, and
wow,
her.
this is really interesting. This is
Yes.
amazingly interesting. I mean, here's a girl. I mean, to all the viewers, right? I just want to say this. Here's a girl who said, "Look, I want to do my MBA from a good B school, and my parents won't let me take the CAT for the third time, and I'm going to use the postal address of a friend." Wow, what a story!
Yeah.
Super. Continue, please. Yeah.
So she has been my confidant, and she and her mother were the only souls who knew that I was taking this exam. I would venture out and pick up the card, and I went to take the exam on the designated date, and I remember the date on which I had the FGDs. I was in North Delhi, and the FGDs were to be conducted in South Delhi, and of course, I didn't have to tell my parents. And NIFT was, there was a weekly off or something, so I had to cook up some story, and there was some Ashtami Puja at home that day, so I had to complete all of that. And I remember I had started driving then, and I drove like a maniac. I skipped the jump light, and I remember I still clearly remember the policeman, blowing his whistle trying to stop me because I jumped the signal. I just let all of that be. I had my FGD at IFT, reached there on time. So, and in those days, there were no Google Maps. So everything had to be done very, very surreptitiously. I had to figure out what the location was. I didn't know where this campus was, and you know where it is. It's hidden somewhere inside that Kutub educational area and so on.
Okay.
So, anyways, I made it on time. I cleared. I was glad. Once I got my final admission, I told my parents, and
So did
they
you
were
get
very
into
happy.
how many IIMs did you get into, or was it focused on getting into Bangalore?
I got through IIM Lucknow and Bangalore, and the
Oh,
decision
so
was
you did this FGD thing 2-3 times, right?
yes. So, and the decision was very clear. It has to be fathered away from home so that my parents don't haunt me. So that's how I chose
They're going to be
Bangalore.
watching this show.
Yes, they're happy now. So yeah, they were very proud of the outcome.
So
Once I told them.
how did your parents react when you went and said, मैं चुपके से जाके एक IIM का लगा दिया, मुझे मिल गया? What was their reaction?
They couldn't believe. They thought I have done something hanky panky. They were not very clear as to what had hit them and what had transpired in all these months. Yeah, but there was. I mean, not for a moment did they try to stop me from going.
Oh, nice. So then how was I? So IIM was the first time you were leaving Delhi and going and living on campus in an alien land, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're a Delhi girl, Bangalore is as alien as it can get.
It was a good experience. Again, those were the days of no internet had just started to seep into our lives. We were comfortable. I think I was happy being where I was. The campus was beautiful. The friends there, the intellectual environment, of course, the weather. Bangalore weather is beautiful. So it was all a great adjustment. It was a beautiful 2 years. Very hectic though. I mean, we all know that. Very little sleep time. I think once one completes MBA program, one realizes that how much you had been missing sleep. But it was a very beautiful program. I loved every bit of it.
Any particular course which you really enjoyed in IIM Bangalore? Any professor you want to do a hat tip?
Sure. Yeah, I love marketing. I think that's where my love for marketing and my own realization that that's the stream I wanted to specialize in started. We had short names for our professors, and I don't remember their real names. I don't want to call out the names that we had for them. But yeah, there were some very good marketing professors. And I also had a lot of love for just studying a lot of subjects. So my friends sometimes used to make fun of me. I used to sometimes attend classes that I hadn't signed up for, not the whole course, but a random, class here and there. And I would get my leg pulled for that. Here it is that we can't attend the classes that we have signed up for, that we are bunking our classes that we are supposed to attend, and you're going and attending random classes. So it was a very good experience. I think.
So does IIM Bangalore allow a non-registered student to attend a class? Was it okay?
I was a part of the PGP curriculum. I don't think there was no restriction on anybody coming and sitting for a class. As you know, I was a part of the batch. I don't recall any.
Sometimes professors expect you to take permission before you attend. So sometimes
I was happily ignorant if that happened.
Okay. And so I think you might have been in Ramesh Kumar's class. He used to teach marketing, and of course, Rishikesha was teaching there.
Yes. Yes.
And I have another friend of mine, I think Ramanujam Sridhar, who was also a guest faculty there. There was another friend of mine called Bringi Dev.
Yes. Right? All these professors are.
Mithilesh Jha must have.
Yes.
Yeah, so, okay.
Yes. All these professors are.
You might have had some funny names. Like you said, you might have had some funny names for these guys. So
Rambo.
Who's Rambo? Mithilesh.
A marketing. No, Ramesh Kumar. Professor
Ramesh Kumar Rambo. Oh, nice.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So
I was trying to circumvent that.
Oh, nice. It's okay. I mean, Ramesh, I think, is now retired and he's kind of adjunct now. And he had invited me a couple of years ago. I had gone to give a talk. So he's a prolific writer. Yeah, the amount of cases he's written, I still use some of those cases in my own class. So
yeah,
amazing. Yes. So from campus, PNG was first day, first show.
So when I actually got PNG at that time, I wasn't. Super convinced or super happy. I wanted to go back to Delhi. Somehow this thing was bothering me that I'm not sure when I'll be, how long I'll be able to live with my family. I think it came back to haunt me that I wanted to go back to Delhi.
Are you an only child?
No, I'm not. I have an elder brother.
Okay.
Yeah, but I reluctantly joined. I was reluctant to go to Mumbai. I was very kicked about PNG, but I joined Mumbai. And Mumbai is a very difficult city initially for somebody who's from Delhi to settle into. But of course, it grows on you very quickly. So the initial few things that were bothering me was lack of personal transportation. The fact that we were where we were living and where the workplace was, there was a huge commute involved. These were the kind of things that I was not very comfortable with. But very soon enough, I realized what a beautiful city it was, especially for women. Very safe, very professional. And of course, the number of options which are there in Mumbai are, unparalleled. And now, of course, Bangalore at that time was not what it is today. Delhi was also an important hub, but Mumbai was in a league of its own. So the kind of options that were there in Mumbai are unparalleled. So very soon it grew on me and I became comfortable, and PNG moved us to Singapore after a while.
Okay. So which brands did you work on? Was it Was it Olay? Was it fabric wash?
Yeah, so that was another embarrassing experience. I went to office the first day and there were sanitary napkins lying all around, and that was a huge shock. And we had a male marketing director, and I thought, oh, ye kya ho raha hai? How do I touch this thing in front of him? So yeah, I was on the feminine care business on sanitary napkins Whisper. That was the first brand that I started working on, and we had a great team. I had a very good manager who invested a lot of effort into grooming me. And predominantly, my work was a lot on the feminine care business. I worked on Whisper. I also worked on the Tampax launch in India, and I can talk a little more about that. That was an experience in itself, one level higher than Whisper. And I also
Who
worked
was
on
your
profession.
boss? Who was your mentor?
So my first boss was Patricia Matthias. She was the brand manager on Whisper when I joined. And that's the person I'm talking about who invested a lot of effort into grooming me. I think one of the big things that P&G teaches you is to communicate your points especially in writing, very very succinctly and very crisply.
The one
And
page
that
memo. The one page memo, right?
yes, that crispness, the word doesn't do justice to the kind of
So tell us,
uh,
I think it'd be interesting for the viewers to know this whole mystique about this PNG's one page memo, right?
Sure. So I think it's not just a communication tool, it's also a thinking tool. And that's what the crux of the whole thing is. And that's what Patricia used to help me with. So whenever I would take something to her, we would sit down, we would ideate, the constant question would be, so what is it that you're trying to say? What is it that is at the core of it? What is it that is at the crux of the matter? And that really helps to synthesize things. And the beauty of fitting something into one page is that you are constantly culling out whatever is not essential, and that helps you bring down things into a beautiful one page summary, which also becomes very easy for the reader. So as a journey, it starts from being clear in your own thinking. Second step is being able to put it down succinctly, and the third step is for the reader to be able to understand exactly what you're saying, even there to share it.
I think it's
So
it's a very it reminds me of, I think, who said that? George Bernard Shaw said this, right? I apologize for writing a long letter because I don't have the time to write a shorter one, right? So
yes,
like
that exactly captures it.
writing a short memo takes a lot more hard work than to write a long rambling report. So this was what
Yeah.
PNG was, 2 years, 3 years.
I was in PNG for about 3.5 years. And, those were the days when, again, something about writing, those were the days when emailing had, as a backbone of communication was taking on very strongly. So that, again, is a skill that I picked up very strongly at that time. And I remember that sometimes I used to write something and my manager used to say, okay, now, before pressing that send button, she used to say, okay, now let's read. How does it read? And I still, that message still plays in my mind even today, because I've often noticed that sometimes I shoot off something and when I read it later, it doesn't read the way I had intended it to read. And that's again something that
True.
these very fundamental skills sometimes have a very lasting impact on you, and they can have very long bearing repercussions as well.
I know. I used to tell my team that, don't hit the send button. Put it into draft and go back to the mail, especially if you got a nasty mail from a client and you're very tempted to reply back. And I say, look, put it in the draft and go back to it an hour later and read it. You may want to revise it. The other nasty, very bad habit which I've seen people using all caps. I said, look, don't put
Yes.
all caps. All caps is shouting. It's like it's the email shouting at the customer. No, never use all caps. So I'm sure in PNG you would have been trained. I mean, those are the early days of internet, email. You would have been trained. Other danger, which again to the young people watching this, is trail mail. Be careful about the trail mail. A lot of jobs have been lost because the trail mail contained some nasty thing about people which you didn't want them to read. I mean, all that you would have.
Yes.
So
These
then,
are all the
yeah,
trigger happy syndromes.
then you went to Singapore. How
Then
was
I went to Singapore, and I was working on professional marketing. I had another great person who shaped my initial days, initial ways of thinking, initial business acumen. That was Mahesh Iyer, and I was working with him on professional marketing for fabric care and hair care. That
so you finally out of female hygiene?
I had a Tampax stint as well in between. That was another challenging one.
How did Tampax do? I mean, I'm now getting into to get the marketing thing. So
Yeah.
was Tampax a success in India, or is it OB tampon still the market leader?
Tampax was not a success. So this was a time when P&G was in fact trying to try out a lot of new products in India. We had a new product group which would try out various brands. Until then, we had very few brands in India. If you look at the entire P&G portfolio, there were just a few of a handful of the global brands which were there. So the company was very aggressive in its plans and wanted to try out. So Tampax was one of those. And that again has left an indelible mark on my mind as to how does one go about evaluating ideas and accepting failures. So that was a time when I was young. I used to feel the necessity to agree to what was being told, and to be a naysayer was not considered a good thing. So with all of that background, we decided that we'll try out a test market for Tampax in Chennai, and one of the more conservative. But yeah, we used to have a lot of test markets in Chennai because of the media isolability. But so Chennai is very conservative.
I could have told you Chennai is bad news, right? But yeah, okay.
Yeah. So we tried a lot of things. We tried a lot of direct marketing. That was one of the key routes that we used to use for products which needed a personal one-on-one delivery of messaging. And there was I remember Mahesh used to say that it's difficult that this product will succeed, and I used to think that isn't it wrong to say that when you're trying it out? And later, it did happen that the product didn't succeed, and we had to pull it back. But that was a big learning that you have to listen to the consumer. You have to be wise and use your gut along with all the market research and everything. And to be able to say that something is not working takes courage and maturity, and you should be willing to embrace that.
Yeah, so that was OB tampons. How big is it? Is OB tampons actually a big product, or is it also a niche player?
So, Ambi, it's interesting. Even after about 25 years since the time that we tried it on, the tampon market is still very small in India. Many players have tried it, still not mainstream. So even though now, menstrual cups and those new format products have come in, but tampon still happens to be relatively much smaller. And now when I look back and to expect it to have succeeded at that time, really puts things in perspective for me.
Okay. So from female hygiene, you moved to fabric care, and then a short stint at Reckitt. How did that happen?
Yeah, so the family compulsions of the family pressures did take over. I moved back to Delhi. I joined Reckitt for a short time, and I had an arranged marriage with a person who was living in Canada. So I decided to migrate, and that's how Reckitt came, and it moved on, and I moved on, and I went ahead and worked at Nestle in Canada.
Nestle in Canada.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. So it was totally new country, new product category. What was it like to suddenly move to Canada?
Yeah, sure.
Was it Toronto?
Yes, I was in Toronto. So most of the commerce in Canada happens in Toronto, and very cold, very extremely cold, minus 30, 35 degrees Celsius in winters, and long 8-9 months of winters. So it was a different terrain altogether. I think, when I was thinking about this talk, and I was just thinking about my old memories, one of the things I realized was how challenging it was for me when I moved to Canada. So I started job hunting when I landed there. And one of the things that kept being asked to me is, so where is your Canadian experience? So where is your Canadian experience? We can't take you without Canadian experience. And it's a country full of immigrants. Even today, about 22-23% of the population at any given time is new immigrants who've come in the last 2 years. And in Asian immigrants is a huge percentage of that. So for an economy like that, to not openly embrace immigrants is a tough challenge to begin with. So that was, I took a lot of interviews, I met a lot of people, and that's where I think, some amount of resilience helped. I remember one particular instance where I was constantly meeting people. So I met somebody, I had met somebody, and I was coming out of an interview meeting, and I was happy because it seemed to have gone well. And I was walking on the street, and there was a person who was coming across, and he seemed to be a person who lives on the street. And somehow, because I was in a happy mood, I just happened to smile. I gave him a feeble smile, and something in him, irked him, and he spat on me. So that was a very, very upsetting incident for me. And I came and spoke to my husband, and he said that yes, there is some amount of hatred sometimes for immigrants, which people who've been living here longer have. So all of these incidents, I think, were upsetting. But two things could have happened. I could have either lost hope and felt dejected, maybe for a longer period of time, not infinitely, but definitely it could have pulled me down. But I just decided to carry on and move on. But having said that, of course, this incident came back to my mind because it did impact me. And one realizes how tough life can be sometimes for no apparent reason, and you just have to embrace it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's a phenomenal story. That though for a fact that Toronto is supposed to be one of the most global cities in the world. Pico Iyer has written a book called The Global Soul, where he says Toronto is the most global city in the world. It's probably 30 or 40% is immigrant population. So
yes,
if this can happen to you in Toronto, it can happen to you in any though Canada has always been a bit racist. I remember my professor at IIT telling me that how there used to be these bike gangs and with cycle chains and all that when he was a student in Canada, and they used to do this dot buster stuff, right? I mean,
yeah,
go after the Indians especially. But I think all that has come down dramatically, and what you must have gone through must have been an aberration. But good that you've gone through some amount of ragging during your school days. It doesn't affect you. So how did the Nestle thing happen finally?
Yeah. So again, Nestle, was a combination of destiny and perseverance. I kept trying. I was fairly clear again that I wanted to be with one of the global companies. I've had this thing about sticking with the better brand names. I think it gives me a sense of security, and it also helps me keep my association strong with the kind of legacy that they've had. I've always felt that there's more learning that can happen there. So I was choosy in terms of the companies that I was interviewing with, and Nestle saw merit in the P&G training that I would have had, and it happened. It was not at the optimal level, but it worked out. And again, one of the other cured things I remember, one of the interviews that I had gone for, I spoke to the interviewer for a good half an hour, and when I was walking out, I think that person couldn't hold himself back. And just as I was walking, holding the door and about to step out, he said, "I just want to ask you one thing. How do you speak such good English?"
And where have you hidden your pet cobra and your pet elephant?
Yes.
So that is such
these things shape you.
That's a stereotype, right? I mean, you're Indian. How can you speak? Don't you speak Indian? You're speaking English. So
yes.
So which brand did you work on in Nestle?
Yeah, I worked on a frozen meals brand called Stouffer's. Again, a huge cultural deviation. In our culture and in Ayurveda, it's considered that you shouldn't give food thermal shock. So taking something out of a freezer and putting in a microwave is treating food to really extreme temperatures. But that's what the nature of the product was. That's what the culture demanded. That's what the lifestyle over there needed. So this was a whole meal in a plastic tray, which was a ready to eat meal. There was a portion of proteins, there was a portion of carbs, there was a portion of vegetables, which was deep frozen, and you could buy it off the shelf. And when you go home after a full day of work, you zap it in the microwave and sit in front of the TV, and it's called TV dinner, and you eat that.
Do you
Now,
think this kind of stuff will ever happen in India? I'm told during the lockdown, especially during the pandemic, a lot of ready to eat and ready to cook products have become popular.
yeah, yeah.
But do you think this kind of a product will ever become popular in India, or we are still way off?
Yeah, as a marketer, when I look at what kind of things take off in India, I think it's a great jugaad which happens of what ideas exist sometimes in other societies and how they are adapted here. So it may not be an extreme of a frozen meal, except for the McCain's, deep fries and smileys and so on, but something in between. So, for example, the kind of stuff that ID Fresh makes, or the idli batters that are available from some of the other companies, those things have taken off very well. Also, the whole the domestic, the way our domestic lives are woven, and the diaspora, and the way we have domestic help available, those things have an impact. So we always like to have eat fresh food. So we might indulge sometimes in food which is pre-cooked, straight out of the freezer, but there is a cultural thing which I don't think it will change that easily. Even eating from outside, if you look at what is the share of plate that companies like Swiggy and Zomato have, it's less than 5% of the total meal occasions that a individual has.
5% is a hell of a lot. We still believe in cooking. I remember doing research on Whirlpool some years ago, where we discovered in many parts of India the refrigerator is only used for storing, milk, curd, and water, and a little bit of vegetables. Food is cooked and eaten. So it'll take some time. I think maybe the pandemic may have speeded up adoption of things like ready to eat parathas and idli dosa batter and stuff like that. So okay. So
and similarly, Ambi, microwave is only used for a little bit of reheating, not really for microwave cooking.
Oh yeah, we don't do any microwave cooking. We still believe in good old gas. And I don't know whether you've seen this crazy Malayalam film called The Great Indian Kitchen.
You should. I haven't.
It's about this girl from Dubai who gets married to this very traditional Malayali household, where the father-in-law wants everything to be cooked fresh, and rice has to be cooked in a regular stove, not on gas, right? With wooden, with wood, So that's without pressure cooker. It's like so that's the extreme, of course. So that okay. So after Nestle, you were there what, 5 years in?
I was there for around 5 years. Yes.
And then you did a bit of gig economy consulting, something you want to.
That's right. Yeah.
Gig economy is becoming very popular now. I mean, a lot of youngsters saying, I don't want to work 9 to 5, I want to do things on my own, stuff like that. So I'm sure some of them watching the show may learn something from your experience in working in the gig economy.
Yes. So Ambi, what happened was after Canada, my husband went to study at LBS in London. We packed our bags from Canada. We decided that we'll explore another place. I went to London to spend some time over there. I had taken a 2-year sabbatical at that time. So when he finished his studies, we decided to move further east, and we came back home to India. So that's when we came back to Delhi. And that is when all of this transpired. So when I came back to Delhi, I had two choices. I was looking at what is the professional journey I can take, and that's when the next phase began. So this was a time when I could have either gone back to the corporate journey and continued that, or what was happening was this was around 2009. So if you think back, lot of startups were coming. There were a lot of people in my own network and my husband's network, and from our alma mater, and we lived close to IIT Delhi, and there were a lot of friends who were asking for support. And that's when this idea came up in my head. And of course, gig economy was not even a term that was widely prevalent at that time. I mean, gig is more of a term that's used for a trick or a small show that somebody does. So the way it's used now was not prevalent. I decided to take up that risk, and I saw that there was going to be a lot of learning in that, though a lot of risk as well. But that's a journey I took subsequently for the next few years. I think coming to the point of whether it's a good choice or not, what has happened is post the pandemic, things have, it's become clearer to me now on what the advantages are. If you look at stock of companies like Upwork, Fiverr, uh, I think Upwork went up. I was reading somewhere about 125%. Fiverr has increased 3 times, and the number of opportunities. And this is not just US, but even in India, first the number of people who got fired because they were gig workers increased, but then it has come back because companies want to keep more of their costs variable. So just wrapping up my point on the point that I was making was that it is something which offers a lot of opportunities. So definitely from that perspective, it's a good choice. Second, I think a lot of corporates are contributing to the opportunities in the gig economy. So if again you look at the number of gig jobs that are coming up from corporates as well as consulting companies is higher than what is coming up from SMEs and startups. So there again, if somebody wants to be associated with a corporate, it's a good choice. And thirdly, specifically in the area of marketing, technology, consulting, it's a great option. And to add on to that, I think it's also a very good option for women because, again, some studies were saying that for women, losing jobs in post-pandemic has been a wider occurrence. So for women, it's a good option to go use gig working as a leverage to be able to continue. Of course, there are a lot of downsides as well. So I want to not talk about that. I think HR policies have still not caught up. Even government regulations have not caught up. Gig economy was earlier associated with an app and Uber and Lyft drivers, and things have to move beyond that. Otherwise, it will just remain something which gets stifled because of regulations not being able to catch up.
And of course,
So
the
that's
other problem, Sapna, and I think people should be aware of that, is payment. In India, gig economy, there is no protection for payment. So you may get your first, money, and then I've got a guy sitting in Trivandrum who contacted me through LinkedIn, and he does some of my presentations for me. But the first time, he said, no, I will not do it if you don't pay me advance. Finally, he did it, and then I paid him the next day. And then after that, nowadays I send him a job, he sends it. He's sitting in Trivandrum. I've never met him. I've not seen him.
sure.
But that's the power of the internet. That's the power of the new digital thing. Okay, great. After that, and you came back into corporate, and how did the OLX thing happen?
So I had been a gig economy worker for a good 7-8 years, and there were some downsides as well that I was facing, which I think may not so much be the case because what has happened, the technology shift, and the fact that people no more consider, again, to what you were saying, the location where somebody is based as a constraint. All of these things have really moved the way we think about this. But there were some constraints that I was facing. Payment was one big one. And it can also get lonely at times being a gig economy worker. Dilbert fridge magnates, they lose their punch if you're working in a home office. So all of that, I think I felt the need, and OLX opportunity came along, and that's how I took it. It was not so much of a very affirmative step that I was taking, but things worked out, and I decided to go along.
So what is your job like in OLX? I mean, you're overseeing LATAM, APAC, India. So it's like a huge geography.
Yeah. So OLX has been an interesting experience. And the way I look at it, I think it's been a combination of the big corporate flavor that I had earlier, as well as the startup-y kind of culture. When I joined OLX, the marketing team was almost non-existent. It had moved off its heydays of being a huge team with huge spending, and my job was to resurrect the marketing team, build up the ecosystem of all the creative agency, the PR agency, media buying, and so on. So I did that for OLX India. I also handle PR. Also, what we did last year was we've created a new brand called OLX Autos. Now, this again is a shift that has happened in the digital economy, and uh, we had the physical businesses, the likes of P&Gs and Nestle's and so on earlier, and then digital became very strong. But anything which swings too much in one direction usually tends to come back, and I think that coming back has happened, and that's when Phygital is born. So that is what many companies are seeing, and that's what OLX also realized the power of in the form of OLX Auto. So what we've done now is launched a retail component of the online classifieds business to help the consumers be able to buy and sell their cars more easily. So that's the part of the business, and I am currently a part of, and I handle the brand part. The launch for OLX Autos in all of these emerging markets, which has been clubbed together as one group.
And so it's been an exciting new ride. I mean, completely new industry, or were you consulting with this sector, so you knew a lot about?
I know. So autos is new, physical is not new, and digital is not new. Phygital is new, and I think there is a lot to be learned. I think Ambi, this is where I feel that all the long-standing skills, all the time-tested skills that were inculcated in me as a part of my early career, plus whatever I've learned from the digital economy, the combination of that becomes a very potent thing, and that's what comes into play. And I think that's what is something that becomes a strength when we are running a business like this. And that's what sometimes I see missing in some of the practices when I look around.
So, what you're saying is so very true. And, one or two other guests here have spoken about it. It's something I've also written about, which is there is almost a kind of a schizophrenic marketing orientation in the new age companies. What I call
you put it across very well.
Yeah, they have this performance marketing. There is performance marketing, which is how many clicks and how many orders, blah, blah, blah. They do
and
that.
The rest of it is non-performance.
Yeah, they do that very well, right? But the other side is what is called brand marketing. Brand marketing is not something they understand at all. I mean, why should we do that? How many clicks will it get? But, and the two cannot meet. And the problem in the advertising world has been divided between the so-called creative agencies and the digital agencies. So digital agencies don't understand brands, and quote unquote creative agency don't understand performance marketing. So I think people like you who bring in understanding of how brands are built, and during the pandemic, the other problem has been a lot of brand managers just sitting at home. So the only job is to call the agency to say, today is Father's Day, today is Obama's birthday, let's put out a post. And
true,
so,
that's very unfortunate. Very true. Ambi, what you're saying is you hit the nail on the head. It's this is this kind of compartmentalized way of thinking, and also a very compartmentalized way. The other thing that I've observed is, again, while working with startups, a lot of the startup founders were from tech background because very rightly so. If there was a good idea, and you need to get started, and the product is the best place to get started. But the consumer piece comes in very late. So it's absolutely fine for the consumer piece to come in late, because many a times the consumers may not know what is even being spoken about. A classic case is an iPhone. If Steve Jobs went and asked the consumers about it, we wouldn't have landed anywhere. But the consumer centricity, as we now call it, being centered around the consumer, being focused on the consumer, if that piece doesn't come in at the right time, that is also a problem. So segregating brand and performance, one component being performance marketing, one component being the non-performance marketing, and putting the consumer completely out of the picture, having a product development journey which is completely bereft of any consumer contacts is a downward spiral. And those are some of the practices that I see widely prevalent. I'm not making a blanket critique, but I'm just saying that it is a practice that has become fairly commonplace, and it has very strong downsides.
Yeah, true. Okay, good. So I think we are nearing the last bit of our show here. All successful CMOs have been shaped by some mentor or the other, right? So I know you mentioned a couple of names. Anyone you want to speak about who was a mentor, is a mentor, who's helped you along your fabulous journey?
Sure, Ambi, I've spoken about a few people, and I also, I find it easy to take inspiration from anywhere I look around. And uh, I was just reading up about you lately, and I think that the kind of stuff that you have done is amazing. So I think I just take up energy from wherever I get it. I'm fairly ambivalent about it, and I'm also I also
You're
know.
ambivalent because you're sitting in front of me.
I also know I find it easy to motivate myself. So I think that's one quality which I think resilience, as well as being able to push yourself, is something that fortunately comes easy to me. But there are other qualities which pull me
Great.
back.
I think it's been terrific to kind of listen to your career, your first education, how you were hell bent on getting into an IIM, and you went and did the test and got into IIM Bangalore, and then of course, uh, in coming to Mumbai, and then going to Singapore, and then to Canada. It's been a great journey. So I have a few last, rapid fire questions. You can feel free to add to these if you want. One is that since you're really a global citizen, you lived in India, you've lived in Singapore, you lived in London, you've lived in Canada. Which is your favorite city in the world and why?
Yeah, I liked Singapore quite a bit. I, it's a city I took on to instantly the moment I started living over there. It's very green. That's something that hits you. Despite being a very small island, and despite having such density of population, I think the government over there has done a fabulous job, and that's something which is very endearing, very important for me to see greenery around. Also, weather-wise, it's good. So personally, the kind of weather that I faced in Toronto was not something that I felt very happy about. It's not something that really warmed up my soul. So weather-wise, Singapore was great. Culturally, I think it's great.
Culturally, it's a
Good.
little too pasteurized, isn't it? I mean, you don't get. I mean, like you don't get the kind of Broadway shows there. You don't get the kind of gigs you probably would have seen in London or in New York. So it's a little bit too sanitized for my liking. But yeah, I mean, I'm yet to meet someone who's lived in Singapore who doesn't love that city.
Yeah. So maybe you need to go and live there.
I've been there so many times. But yeah, anything else you want to talk about which is outside work, some passion of yours?
So one of the things that I can talk about that I'm currently indulging myself in is again something for self personal growth and personal development. It's a very recent thing called non-violence communication, about which I've been reading up a lot. Have some communities that I'm a part of. It's called NVC for short. Um, I also find it very useful tool, self connect tool. And Ambi, the other thing that I have realized about myself as I'm growing into organizations and being responsible for people, that the people connect is something which is very important for me. I tend to get very protective about my team members and about the people I work with, and I really want to take care, because I feel people put in a lot of hours and so on, and they need to be taken care of. Hence, it's not just a contractual relationship that one should look at. I think there's a lot of emphasis on talking in corporates, but listening as a skill is not something that we put a lot of emphasis on. And NVC as a tool to connect with people, to connect with yourself, helps to understand that it's a much deeper thing that I don't want to talk, go rambling about in too much details. But yeah, that's something that I'm indulging myself in. It's an intellectual as well as spiritual journey of some sorts.
Great. I mean, as a coach, one of the things we are taught as a first step is to do what is called active listening. Not just listen, but get all your senses together to listen. If you don't do active listening, you're not going to establish empathy. If you don't establish empathy, you're not going to be able to coach that person. So it's a part of, and
Exactly.
So there is
Empathy is actually the backbone of non-violence communication.
and
So.
not sympathy, right? I mean, we spend an hour
Yes.
discussing the difference between sympathy and empathy, right? So interesting. So before we wind up, some last bit of advice to young marketing professionals, marketing students who may be watching the show.
Sure, I'm always happy to give advice because I have teenage sons who don't listen to me. So happy to give advice to anybody who's willing to listen. I think just be happy about what you're doing. Do things with joy. And if something is not giving you joy, I think as one progresses in one's career, one can be mindful. I think when we start our journeys, Ambi, we probably take up 80% of what has been put on our plate, and 20% is where we make a choice. But I think as we move along in our careers, we can probably make the shifts gradually and move towards a reversal in this ratio from an 80-20 to a 20-80, and be mindful of what are things that are compromising on our values and what are the things that are not. For example, when I was working on Stouffer's in Nestle, I'm not a meat eater, but I took up that job. I wanted that job. I was very happy with the company. I was very happy with everything else. I clearly knew that a part of the job involved tasting the food that we were going to sell, or, there were a lot of recipes which we would try. And, a very active part of the whole thing was testing. And I took it up. In hindsight, or rather, I would say now I wouldn't do that. Not in hindsight, but now, because that 80-20 has shifted to 20-80. That's something I wouldn't do. So my message would be, recognize what your values are and go with it. And the second thing which has helped me always is being resilient. I think that's a good value that helps in any situation. So
Great.
So much for the gyan.
Yeah. So thank you, Sapna. That was an amazing conversation, from your education to your career journey, and a great bit of advice on how to balance, what you're passionate about, what are your values, and of course, what you need to sacrifice to build your career. So I know people have gone through these kind of journeys, and I think it's good to listen to someone who's probably much younger than me, who kind of, today the youngsters are all very obsessed about landing the dream company job, etc., etc. But in the long run, that doesn't matter, right? I mean, finally, you need to find your place and then find your peace with what you're doing. And then, as long as you're learning things new, as long as you're reinventing yourself, you're good. And I think your stories about the way you bounced back after several, issues, several challenges, it's amazing. So, Sapna, thank you very much for joining us on this Be Positive show on etbrandequity.com. And this is your host, Ambi Parmeshwaran, thanking you.